Welcome to TheoTrade. This is Don Kaufman. It's May 7th, 2018. You are watching the Theo Night video with just about 9 minutes left in the trading day. The S&Ps, well, first of all, fairly quiet inside of today's trading session. We're up about 6 handles right now, but seeing a little bit of sell side activity kind of late in the trading session. It wouldn't surprise me, again, with just this 9 minutes left trade as we're recording this video, I would anticipate some more sell side activity, and we'll explain a bit more on that front right here, right now. We're also going to take a very detailed look at a number of setups coming for the remainder of the next few days, next couple of weeks. All right, let's kind of dig into the S&P futures. As I said, it was a fairly quiet day in trade. We're staring down the face right now of just about 1 million S&P contracts. In fact, it's about 1 million S&P contracts almost on the button here. The other aspect I want to talk about is something that, well, we've been talking about now for literally weeks on end. The levels inside of the S&P futures. People, it couldn't be any cleaner or any clearer than what we're seeing specifically today. We talked just on the weekend update about coming up, and specifically coming up to the 2682. I don't know. Will you give me that one? We hit 2681 half, but we talked about, again, this being one of our gravity points and kind of reverberating back down thereafter. So you can kind of check that box. Again, if we zoom out in time, something I've been mentioning kind of day in and day out here at TheoTrade, we're just pinging back and forth, okay, amongst the levels. And just because we hit 2682 does not per se construe that we're just going to come right back down to 2626. We do have quite a bit of what I would term kind of some binary news announcements tomorrow. So there's actually quite a bit of news throughout the course of this week. There's always the chance of a couple of tweets as well. Nevertheless, I want to remind you of that when you zoom out on this, you would think, all right, we hit the 2682. Let's, check that box, and we're going to go right back down to 2626. There are some signs of a bit more volatility coming back into play. One in particular, especially on an intraday basis today, one thing that really stood out to me, and this might not look like much to you, but what I am bringing up has to do with the volatility futures. Now, this can be really insightful on an intraday basis. This is the CBOE Volatility Index Futures, and I'm looking here at the /VX M8. That's the June contract. And all I wanted to display to you is that early in today's trading session, as we just saw in the S&Ps, earlier in today's trading sessions, the S&Ps were climbing higher. Meanwhile, the entire time, volatility refused to back off. So that's indicative, okay? It's very indicative of the marketplace pricing in the chance of sell-side activity late in any given trading session. In fact, we're even seeing just a little bit of a pickup in volatility as we come kind of later into today's session. So all I'm saying on this front is you said, hey, I might expect just a little bit more selling to come into play right as we come into the cash close. It's because the volatility futures have picked up. Moreover, the advanced decline line has not been stellar today. And at a point today, again, we hit all the way into 2681. Now, let's completely change gears and look at a couple of opportunities and a few specific underlyings. Some of what I would term discount retailers have been incredibly weak today, including, for example, Walmart. And we'll just take a look at Walmart on an intraday basis. Now, granted, Walmart does have its earnings announcement right around the corner. This is not necessarily a position that I might elect to take right now. It's an incredibly tight trading range, though, that we've seen in about the last month. Similarly, Target also facing earnings in the very near term, also an incredibly tight trading range. Appears both Walmart, Target to be breaking possibly the downside of that. However, rather than necessarily go into a Walmart or Target. You can see I've got Costco on there. You can consider looking at XRT. Now, just a quick warning on XRT. XRT, which happens to be the S&P retail ETF, this does not include names and holdings like a Costco, a Walmart, and a Target. This includes like, Guess, Tailored Brands, Finish Line, Ulta, DSW. However, if you take a look at the tight range, it is very, very similar, okay, in the stance that we've seen inside of Walmart and Target. Obviously, since it's an ETF, we don't necessarily have any earnings to deal with. Continued weakness in those retailers is very likely to see a break to the downside, of course, in the XRT. And that's a trade that I think at this point in time is probably worth exploring. And I will be exploring that in the TheoTrade chat room coming into Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'm going to be looking for probably an in-out spread inside of XRT. All right, moving onward and upward. XLE. Yet another ETF. It's ETF mania. So I've talked extensively about the energy and energy sector, and this is geopolitical risk kind of at its best. What you got here was an energy sector, and I'll zoom back out to a longer term chart, but what you got here is an energy sector that has been in a relatively tight range. Geopolitical risk bursts to the upside. Some of that risk abates late in the day. We see some sell side activity. Overall, where did we go? Absolutely nowhere. We're stuck right back in the 74 range. But again, to me, this is indicative of some more sell side to come. However, this is where there's going to be a lot more geopolitical risk in the next 24 hours. Major announcements are being made that are going to impact, of course, Middle Eastern oil supply. So I am going to kind of shy away from adding a degree of risk. I've already got a short position inside the XLE. I'll shy away from adding any additional risk because some of the geopolitical headlines that will be hitting in there. Next up on the plate, Caterpillar. All right, what am I looking for in Caterpillar? Now, I currently have a long duration short position in here. What I happen to be looking for, there's a little bit of a break to the upside. I want to see, okay, just 2 or 3 days of follow through, and I will re-up a short position in here. Now, the short position will actually be an in-out spread. Again, I intentionally want to get directionally biased. This is the kind of volatility that I live for. When you see an underlying, 3 days in a row, literally bursting to the upside, man, the fourth day or so, I might take a short position. And how do I take a short position? I use a defined risk in-out spread. I like to stand in the way of a freight train, let that underlying come back in. Caterpillar is a very nice setup in the near term for just that. Looking down the list, and the final underlying I would like to look at this evening is none other than Intel. And Intel to me is, in effect, of a way to trade the broader Nasdaq without just really exacerbating a huge amount of risk in it. I mean, come on, we're looking at a $53 underlying. Here's another one where I would consider a short position in the near term. We're looking Intel at, highs and more highs. Obviously, we're just off of a very recent closing high. This is a big reactionary candle up here, although I think Intel believe it still has a little bit more upside potential to it. Nevertheless, if you are looking at the Nasdaq, all right, and you're like, well, I want to take a short position to the Nasdaq, but the Nasdaq on a percentage basis is a little weaker than, for example, Intel. Again, the Intel trade isn't so much about Intel. It's about me wanting to take another bearish position inside of the Nasdaq. On a percentage basis, though, if the markets are going to sell off, I'm going to get more bang for my buck on the Intel position to the downside. That, again, is a trade that I will share with you live inside the TheoTrade chat room throughout the remainder of this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us here at TheoTrade. S&Ps are closed for the trading session right and around this 2670 range. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.